Following such exhilarating presentations, 4 of them, there's very little left for me to say. So I need help, and I'm going to use a few pictures to help me follow up on what has been a remarkable set of presentations. We heard earlier today that the Club of Rome in 1972 produced a book called The Limits to Growth, which was quite extraordinary in its implications. It started the environmental movement in many ways. It basically got into terrible trouble with the economics profession, which claimed that engineers should have nothing to do with prognosticating about the future. And until about 2000, it was really in the dumps because nobody believed that there was really any problem about the economy of the world, about resources, about environmental issues, about demography, about the kinds of futures that we had. But already in 1976, 4 years after the Limits to Growth was published, there was another book produced, second book produced actually, by the Club of Rome, and that was called No Limits to Learning. So one has to recognize that the world grabs onto the negatives very quickly, and Limits to Growth became the imprimatur, the logo, the slogan of the Club of Rome. But in fact, actually, the real slogan of the Club of Rome was No Limits to Learning. And I would like to share with you a few things about that today, including the whole issue of Education 4.0 and 5.0 and maybe 6.0, what it means for the future of humanity, future of the planet. The planet, of course, will always be here. That's not a major problem. But civilization, humanity, the species that we are, and life on Earth is to some extent in jeopardy. And the Club of Rome has spent the last 50 years trying to alert people to the need for change in our directions. So let me just see if my thing is working. You will see here a variety of problems that our world faces. It's essentially virtually almost everything that the headlines are made of these days: pollution, population, poverty, climate change, social breakdown, terrorism, even finance. We're really looking at pretty bleak futures with incredible inequity and disparity driving the engines of our economies. We have climate change, we've got the problems of species extinction, we've got problems of chaotic urbanization, we've got essentially issues relating to poisoning ourselves, both through the waters and our air atmosphere. Essentially, we've been doing pretty heavy-duty stuff on the resources of the planet. And our ecological footprint now exceeds 2 times what the Mother Earth produces in a year. So we're really heading for trouble, and we've got to have an understanding that despite the fact that we're putting such strains on Mother Earth, half the population of the world got completely left behind. Here's a picture of a family that works in an area that my own organization spends a lot of time in central India. It's called Bundelkhand. It's a very poor and fragile ecosystem and economy. And every time I see this picture, it worries me because you look at that woman and her whole world is in that picture. What's worse is, the question always keeps coming up in my mind when I look at that picture: how many potential Marie Curies or Lata Mangeshkars are we losing every year because of the fact that they do not have access to anything? Not to nutrition, not to food, not to education, not to healthcare. And the country is actually losing those very people who can build the nation. We recently suffered from various kinds of reminders that both poverty as well as affluence can be major league disasters. And here is a famous diagram. It's called the Champagne Theory of Life. It's a 1991 cover of the Human Development Report. The first Human Development Report published by UNDP in 1991 which basically stated about 80% of the, 85% of the income of the world goes to about 20% of the people. Well, it's no longer true. Things have got much, much worse. It's now not a champagne glass, but a bar stool. It's now, we don't talk about 20% and 80%, we talk about 1%. And in some places, we're talking about 0.1%. The driving forces of our global and national economies are such that a few very, very rich people and a very large number of extremely poor people have to share space and time together. And it's not viable. That is not a sustainable present, let alone a sustainable future. This is a diagram using government statistics. The red lines are the undernourished and hungry in millions. The blue line is the number of millionaires in India in the thousands. Now, you can see there's a total disjoint between the two, and we are rapidly generating. In the 2 years of COVID, we've really created another 35 billionaires. Now, you know, having started at the beginning of COVID with 130, so 140 maybe, we have about 170 billionaires, and we've got twice as many poor people than we had at the beginning of this thing. And this is all about the kind of economics policies that we've chosen. GDP is king. We need more FDI. We need more Sensex. We need to get better stock markets, growth rate up, earnings, rising portfolios. This is all that our policies and our newspapers and our business pages talk about. It's a hit and run economy on the resources. And we talk about sustainable and resilience and even regenerative economies for the future in our circles, but basically for whom? And the economists keep asking, what did the future do for us? Why should we care about the future? And you know, in most of our work and policies, nature doesn't count, people don't count, communities don't count. So ultimately, we need really to change our way of thinking. And that's where learning systems and education come in. So the governments of the world got together in 2015. 195 heads of state came to New York. They agreed on these goals, these so-called SDGs. The Sustainable Development Goals were hammered out over a period of 3.5, 4 years. A very, very large, probably the largest in history, what you might call consultation of stakeholders of all kinds, from governments to the poorest of the poor, indigenous people, people with human rights, people on environment. And we worked very hard to come up with a set of goals, and they're agreed upon. They are now essentially enshrined in the minds of policymakers all over the world as being important things to do. And of course, today we're talking about mainly about the SDG 4, though if you look at it, SDG 4 is relevant to every single one of them. It underlies everything we do. If we can't have a society in which people can learn the right thing and the way to live correctly in relationship to each other, to nature, we've got a pretty doomed future. So in a sense, every single SDG is on the plate right now. So what can we do to get educational systems to help us change track? Well, good learning systems seem to me to have two very important apex qualities. One is excellence, and the other is relevance. And if these two don't come together, you're frankly up the creek as far as civilization is concerned. A large part of our existing higher level educational systems have a great deal to do with excellence, but very little to do with relevance. And the other end, what little we have for relevance doesn't have the excellence in it. Now, the purposes of education, I've tried to list in a sort of a general way. People have been talking about it all morning and afternoon. They should be to generate good values and goals in people's lives. Knowledge, basic knowledge, to generate new knowledge, to share it. Skills, particularly to be able to get work and to be able to produce income for oneself. And then, of course, there are things like networks and jobs and so on. How is it? It's often the other way around. Our education has been geared much more towards what you might call vocational training, et cetera, but to do, in a sense, to invert the priorities that true education should have. Now, I don't think really, in a sense, it's correct to put a priority. They're all important. Every single one. In fact, I would say that you have essentially to do both. The role of conventional education has been basically to do with values and the human interactions needed for that. But then the role of advanced systems of AI and information technology-based systems can basically put much more emphasis on the issues of jobs and networks and so on. But we are living in a time of incredibly rapid, exponential change in terms of technologies. And when we talk about education 4.0, you know, really, within a decade, it gets to 5.0. Within 5 years, it'll be at 6.0. Right now, things are changing so rapidly, we've got to recognize that we're at the cusp of either making the right decisions or the wrong ones. And if we're going to get that little girl into a position where she can really be herself and be able to contribute to building her nation, then frankly, 4.0, 5.0 have to be totally different. We are going to spend the rest of the few minutes I have talking about the people who got left behind. The India of 400 million odd people is doing fine. They're doing well. All of us have pretty solid material existence. We've got comforts, and we've got mobility, and we've got sources of fulfillment, human fulfillment in our lives that anybody in the world has. We're comparable to not just Southern Europe, but to any advanced country. But the other 800 million people in Bharat really did get left behind. And unfortunately, they're getting more and more left behind. And that's where it seems to me that AI really has a role to play. Right now, it's being driven almost entirely by profit motives. It's being driven by private sector, by entities that are essentially looking for how to make more money. And the only way you can do that is by driving the forces of disparity even more. And we've got to figure out ways in which AI can become relevant to this girl and the two brothers. One of her brothers is almost invisible because in reality and in symbolic terms, they're totally invisible to people like us. Despair, alienation, violence, this is what you're going to get. It doesn't matter how rich you are, you're not going to be protected from this. Unless we understand that they are as important for us as we are, as our own children are. And until we dedicate all the progress that we are making in this technology to them as the first priority, we've had it. Our country is going to be no longer livable, and you can be sure that everybody will be still looking for ways in which these 300 million odd people who got left behind don't have access to clean water, they have no fuels for cooking, they die. 500,000 women die every year from indoor air pollution, which is a euphemism for the smoke that they have to breathe in every day from their kitchen fires. We have an India that is exclusive in some ways, and a Bharat that is excluded. India's GDP increased in the second quarter of 2021 by 8.4%, but the number of poor doubled. Indian billionaires, as I said, grew richer by 35%, but around 120 million people lost jobs during COVID. Third largest startup ecosystem in the world, with so-called unicorns coming out of our ears. And then look at the number of MSMEs, including my own, that either died or nearly died. We know that this is a tough situation for the people who are really creating jobs. Those are not the people who create jobs. It's those people who create jobs. And they're dying. And what is artificial intelligence doing for them? India aims to become a $5 trillion economy, so-called, and the unemployment rates are in double digits. And you know, these rates are phony. Government statistics tell you that India's got 7.6% unemployment. That's ridiculous. I don't know what kind of economics training the people had who come up with these figures, but everywhere I go, there are literally 10, 15, 20% people who are looking for jobs who don't have them. So we've got to keep our mind on what kind of a future we want, and we need to change from the kinds of economic systems that have driven our nature and our society and our communities into the ground to go into a totally different approach, what we might call a circular regenerative economy. You have possibilities for industrial ecology, you have possibilities for urban mining, you have possibilities for using nature to do all your work for you if you use the 5 kingdoms of nature in the way that nature uses them. Because you remember, nature has no waste. Nature is actually a system which produces more than it takes. And our industries have to be based on that. I show you this picture because it's the headquarters of my organization. It's about 8 kilometers from here, south of here. This is a building that has been built with innovations that were designed essentially for a regenerative future. This uses almost entirely, about 80% of that building is waste material, is using waste materials or recycled construction debris, etc. And in terms of its management of space and time and water and resources, it's a major league breakthrough. And we've developed a whole range of resources and methods and so on, which are totally different from conventional ones, but they need different kind of understanding and learning. And all the kinds of things that you need to do in order to create jobs, to create small enterprises, to be able to generate real futures, you've got to have great learning systems. Those learning systems based on creativity and being able to learn and unlearn things that are that you need. Today's most urgent need is innovative and socially oriented minds at all levels, not just the middle class and the rich, but also in the village, where they have to find solutions for their own life. Now, I'm just going to take 5 more minutes with a particular example of where we've been, and just to give you an idea of what a marriage between traditional and high-tech, between education 1.0 and education 5.0 could look like, and is needed. And that is a model in which we started actually with a program to create literate women. There's something of the order of 320 million or so women in India who cannot read or write, and many of them cannot even count. They don't know whether they've got the right change from their vegetable seller. We are talking about a very large number of people who are excluded from society, partly because they are no longer functionally able to deal with day-to-day problems. So we started a new kind of mechanism to use a very high-tech, very sophisticated literacy program, literacy and numeracy program, and from teaching them how to be able to read and write, we were able to take them through various kinds of life skills and job skills to becoming entrepreneurs. Now, not every one of them does that, and I'll show you that there is a pyramid, but basically the idea is to take the highest technology available for that purpose and put it into use to convert and change, transform literally lakhs, millions of lives. And the way we do that basically is that we start with the first course, which is called Tara Akshar. Tara is our company name, Akshar is alphabet. And it's basically a package to teach her how to read, write, and do arithmetic in 56 days, in less than 2 months. She's able to basically write a little letter saying thank you to the people who paid for her scholarship. And it's a minimally trained instructor, a laptop, a highly intelligent AI-based software, and it teaches an illiterate person very, very fast how to read and write and do arithmetic. The results are phenomenal. We've worked in 8 states with Hindi-speaking women. The number that were made illiterate is almost 250,000. Most of it was paid for by foundations and by various donor agencies. And the pass percentage is of the order of 96, 97%. It's phenomenal what good technology can do. We know that. And we're basically using that to go forward, and it's been approved and recognized and awarded prizes and so on. Now, the USP of Tara Akshar is that it's the fastest, full literacy and numeracy. Actually now, we give a little extra time, 56 days. Highest pass rates, strongest in terms of memory and reinforcement techniques, easiest, it does not need an expert instructor, and it's most reliable in terms of being able to deliver. And it's reasonably low cost. Far less cost than normal literacy programs. Now, what it basically does is to use very advanced cognitive technologies, memory hooks and all the other kinds of things, and to use letters. The entire Hindi alphabet has been converted into common everyday objects, like here, Khan, two ears come together, and they morph into K. And then they unmorph, become Khan. And so because it begins with a K, Khan, she remembers that. And we can teach literally within 4 or 5 evenings worth of work how these morphed letters come together, whether it's G for Gajar, whether it is K for Khan, whether it's T for tomato. All of them basically get carved into her memory. And she can't forget them after a few days. In fact, after a few days, we have to unlearn them in order for her to not say Khan instead of K. So it's a pretty sophisticated process which works. Training of trainers, quality control, everything, the delivery system is a part of the deal. It's an army operation. It's a war against ignorance and illiteracy, and it's run like an army. Delivered all over the countryside, and it's been extremely effective. We basically get letters from each one of them, and they're very, and huge press coverage. So I just give you that as an example of how you start the process. Now, having learned how to read and write, what next? Well, she needs a job. She needs a little bit of idea about how she can use her newfound skills. So first, stage 2A would be life skills, information on health and hygiene, on basic etiquette, how to improve her ability to communicate and so on. 15 days of training on that. Then there is a second part of that, which is financial literacy and numeracy, how to manage her money, basically, simple things. Maybe even dealing with banks and government schemes, but primarily how to account for her newfound sort of ability to generate money. Then there is vocational training, which is essentially basically to be able to get a job. What kind of things she needs to know in order to be able to go, and what is required of people who are in a regular job. And then finally, in the third stage, we actually choose a few who will become entrepreneurs, who will create jobs, who create significant numbers of jobs. And we're talking about now, over the last 7, 8 years, we're talking about these results in the tens of thousands and lakhs. So it's been quite a remarkable journey to take them from functional literacy, from illiteracy, not ignorance, but illiteracy, to functional literacy, to life skills, to entrepreneurship skills. And then you can see from the pyramid that we basically end up with roughly 1/10 of them wanting to become entrepreneurs. 1/10, 1/20 of them, and the costs are pretty minimal. So I gave you that as an example where I believe a large part of our future attention for high technology for learning should be. There's, in our country, 800 million. In the rest of the world, another 1.5 billion people, men and women and youth, who are completely outside their economies, their mainstream economies, and they're going to be only able to improve their own lives, but also contribute to the building of their nations' economies if they have a chance of the kind I'm talking about. Thank you.